Stolen vehicle report. I need your license and registration now.
There is no stolen vehicle. You're wrong, officer.
I'm not debating this with you.
What did you just say?
You're making this harder than it needs to be.
Judge Caroline Blacksmith was 3 miles from her chambers when Officer Michael Russell's patrol lights flared behind her silver Audi A6. She hadn't exceeded the speed limit, hadn't drifted lanes, hadn't committed a single traffic violation. She was a federal judge about to become the target of the very corruption she'd spent years prosecuting. What Russell didn't know, 4 cameras were recording every second of what he was about to do. The woman he was stopping had the authority to seal RICO indictments that could dismantle criminal cartels. The briefcase on her passenger seat contained classified documents that would trigger federal emergency protocols within minutes. And the fabricated traffic stop he was conducting would expose a 12-year criminal enterprise, end with 48 years in federal prison, and result in $11.9 million in damages, every cent of which would fund the organizations working to end police corruption. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know if you enjoyed the story. Let's continue. Judge Caroline Blacksmith was 45 years old. She had graduated in the top 3% of her class from Yale Law School, spent 9 years as a federal prosecutor with a 92% conviction rate on organized crime cases, and clerked for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Her appointment to the federal bench 6 years earlier had survived Senate confirmation hearings so rigorous they had scrutinized her undergraduate thesis. She presided over cases involving RICO prosecutions, government corruption, and matters requiring national security clearances. She had the authority to classify court proceedings, issue warrants that could freeze assets across international borders, and make decisions that set legal precedent affecting millions of lives. On this particular Thursday afternoon in October, Blacksmith was driving home from the federal courthouse in Houston, taking her usual route through the quiet suburbs. Personal vehicle, a sleek silver Audi A6 she had purchased after 4 years of careful saving from her federal salary. Texas plates clearly visible, registration current. She wore a tailored navy suit, understated diamond studs, and the small federal judiciary lapel pin on her collar that identified her to those who knew what to look for. The patrol lights activated without warning behind her on Westheimer Parkway, 3 blocks past the intersection where afternoon traffic thinned into residential quiet. Blacksmith's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, then to her speedometer. 42 in a 45 zone, no expired tags, no equipment violations. She signaled right, pulling smoothly into the grocery store parking lot ahead, her hands already moving to the top of the steering wheel where they would remain visible. The dashcam mounted behind her rearview mirror activated automatically, its red recording light steady. What Russell couldn't see, the grocery store's 3 exterior security cameras tracking the silver Audi as it rolled to a stop near the pharmacy entrance. What he didn't notice, the pedestrian across the lot lifting a phone, thumb already recording. Russell approached the driver's side window with the measured confidence of someone who had done this 512 times before. His hand rested near his holster, not on it, but close enough to signal authority. His other hand gestured impatiently for the window to descend. Blacksmith lowered it halfway. The autumn air carried the scent of fresh asphalt and cooling engines. Russell's demand came without preamble. License and registration, stolen vehicle report. His tone suggested the matter was already decided. Blacksmith's response was measured, professional. She inquired about the nature of the stop, the legal basis for the detention, her words precise, her inflection neutral. Russell dismissed the question as unnecessary debate, as obstruction disguised as civility. He ordered her to comply immediately, his patience already exhausted. She retrieved her driver's license slowly, deliberately, then reached for the federal judicial credentials she kept in the center console. The ID bore her photograph, the official seal of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas, holographic security features embedded in the laminate, and clearance indicators that marked her as someone whose movements were tracked by federal security protocols. Russell glanced at both documents for perhaps 3 seconds. His eyes moved from the license to the judicial ID, lingering just long enough to register the seal before his skepticism hardened into certainty. He declared the judicial credentials potentially fraudulent, his tone suggesting he'd seen this particular con before a black woman in an expensive car with fake government identification. Blacksmith protested the assessment calmly, noting the security features, the verifiable information, the lack of probable cause for the stop itself. Russell's response was to order her out of the vehicle, his authority absolute in his own estimation. A second patrol car arrived as Blacksmith stepped onto the pavement, her movements slow and compliant. Deputy Ellis Thompson emerged, younger than Russell, his expression uncertain as he took in the scene. Russell gestured toward the Audi, explaining his suspicion of fraudulent identification, of a stolen vehicle report that existed only in his fabrication. Thompson took up position near the passenger side as Russell began his search. Blacksmith stated clearly that the briefcase on the passenger seat contained classified federal documents, that any unauthorized access would constitute multiple federal felonies, that she was invoking her Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search. Russell ignored every word, his hands already reaching for the locked case. The briefcase was reinforced leather, combination lock engaged. Russell forced it open with a pry bar from his trunk, the lock mechanism snapping with a metallic crack that echoed across the parking lot. Inside, 58 pages of classified RICO documents, each marked with federal security classifications, each page detailing operations of a cartel network operating across 3 states. Russell pulled out his personal phone and began photographing, page after page, documents detailing cartel financial structures, encrypted communication protocols, and buried in the intelligence reports evidence of law enforcement corruption, including coded references to a patrol officer in the Houston suburbs who had been funneling database information to cartel affiliates for 12 years. Blacksmith stood 10 feet away, Thompson's hand on her arm, her mind cataloging every violation with the precision that had made her reputation in federal court. Timestamps. Witnesses gathering near the store entrance. The cloud icon appearing briefly on Russell's phone screen as each photo uploaded automatically to his linked storage account, embedding metadata that would prove irrefutable, location coordinates, time down to the second, device identification. Russell finished photographing and turned his attention back to Blacksmith. He produced handcuffs, applying them with unnecessary force that left red marks blooming across her wrists. The metal bit into skin as he guided her toward his patrol car, his grip firm enough to communicate dominance. She was placed in the back seat, the door closing with the particular hollow sound of a cage sealing shut. Russell drove toward the station, his radio crackling with routine traffic, his confidence intact. What he didn't know, Blacksmith's judicial assistant had already noted her missed 4 o'clock security check-in, the protocol violation that would trigger emergency response within the next 18 minutes. What he didn't know, the photographs now residing in his cloud storage included pages detailing an encrypted cartel communication thread in which a patrol officer designated Asset R had been marked for elimination as a liability, whose usefulness had expired. What he didn't know, 4 separate video recordings had captured every moment of the stop, the search, the arrest, evidence that would be synchronized, time-stamped, and entered into federal record before sunset. Blacksmith sat in the back seat, suit disheveled but posture straight, mentally reviewing the federal statutes Russell had violated. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Unauthorized access to classified materials. Evidence tampering. Obstruction of justice. Each charge carried years. Each violation had been documented. The patrol car rolled through suburban streets toward the precinct station, autumn light fading to amber across windshields and storefront glass. Russell adjusted his rearview mirror, catching Blacksmith's reflection. She met his eyes briefly, her expression unreadable. 12 years of corruption was about to collapse under its own weight. 48 years of federal prison time was about to be calculated. $11.9 million in civil damages was about to be awarded. Police reform legislation was about to be drafted across 7 states. But in that moment, Russell believed he had won. He had arrested a woman he assumed was impersonating a federal official, had documented fraudulent credentials, had conducted a lawful search. He had no idea he had just photographed his own criminal enterprise. No idea he had just arrested a federal judge who would transform personal humiliation into systemic accountability. No idea that the woman in his back seat possessed both the authority and the evidence to dismantle everything he had built. The patrol car turned into the station parking lot as the sun dropped below the horizon, casting long shadows across concrete and chain link. Blacksmith's missed check-in timer reached 18 minutes. Federal protocols activated. U.S. Marshals began tracing her phone's last known location. The reckoning had begun. The holding cell smelled of industrial disinfectant and decades of fear absorbed into cinder block. Blacksmith sat on the metal bench, suit jacket creased, hands still marked with the pattern of handcuffs that had been removed only minutes earlier. Her posture remained upright, her expression unchanged from the parking lot, from the patrol car, from every moment Russell had believed he controlled. Captain Victor Reed entered the processing area with the weariness of a man who had supervised too many shifts and ignored too many complaints. He carried the evidence log Russell had prepared: driver's license, one federal judicial identification card flagged as suspicious, and notations about a briefcase search yielding official-looking documents requiring verification. Reed reviewed the log while Blacksmith waited, her silence more commanding than any protest. When he finally looked up, she informed him with precise legal language that Russell had committed multiple federal felonies, that the documents photographed were classified RICO materials tied to an ongoing cartel investigation, and that those same documents contained evidence linking Russell directly to the criminal organization under federal indictment. Reed's face drained of color as the implications assembled themselves. He returned to the evidence log, hands unsteady now, and requested access to the photographed files. What he found in the forwarded images from Russell's phone made his breath catch: encrypted cartel communications, financial transaction codes, and buried in page 47, a threat assessment marking a law enforcement asset designated R for termination due to increased federal scrutiny and diminishing utility. Russell had photographed his own death warrant without realizing it. The cartel had already decided he was a liability. The federal investigation he just accelerated would now inadvertently alert agents to an imminent assassination, temporarily sparing his life while simultaneously guaranteeing his conviction. Reed made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, his voice tight with the realization that his department had just detained a sitting federal judge and compromised a national security investigation. 43 miles away, at the federal courthouse, Blacksmith's judicial assistant, Patricia Wolfe, noted the missed 4 o'clock security check-in with growing concern. Protocol required notification after 20 minutes. At 21 minutes, Wolfe activated emergency response, contacting the U.S. Marshals Service and providing Blacksmith's last known location via the security tracking app all federal judges carried. Marshal teams dispatched immediately, tracing Blacksmith's phone to the grocery store parking lot on Westheimer Parkway. They arrived to find store security footage intact, 3 cameras offering angles that captured every moment of the stop. They found the pedestrian who had recorded the encounter on a phone, the video already uploaded to cloud storage. They found dashcam footage from Blacksmith's Audi, time-stamped and synchronized. 4 separate recordings, 4 angles. 4 irrefutable documentation streams showing an officer fabricating a stolen vehicle report, dismissing valid federal credentials after a 3-second glance, conducting an unauthorized search, accessing classified documents, and photographing 58 pages of materials marked with federal security classifications. The marshals arrived at the precinct station 19 minutes after Reed's phone calls, their authority cutting through local jurisdiction like a blade through paper. They secured Russell's phone, his patrol car's dashcam, Thompson's body camera, and every device that might contain evidence. They released Blacksmith from the holding cell, escorting her to her vehicle with the formal courtesy reserved for federal judiciary. Blacksmith drove back to her chambers bearing the visible evidence of Russell's excessive force: red marks on both wrists, a bruise forming where the handcuff had caught bone. She made calls from her desk as evening deepened into night. Chief Judge Ronald Paxton, Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The investigation launched within hours. Forensic analysis of Russell's digital footprint began immediately, specialists diving into 12 years of activity that painted a portrait of systematic abuse masked as routine policing. 512 traffic stops over 12 years, 450 targeting minorities in a county whose population was 68% white. Statistical analysis revealed an 88% targeting rate against Black and Hispanic drivers, a disparity so extreme it couldn't be explained by any legitimate law enforcement rationale. Database queries told a parallel story. 1,312 unauthorized searches of driver records, criminal histories, and federal databases. Cross-referencing revealed that 247 of those queries had been followed by cash deposits into Russell's personal accounts, totaling $280,000 over 8 years. Financial forensics traced the deposits to shell companies later identified as cartel front operations. Email records recovered from Russell's personal and work accounts contained incriminating communications. Racial slurs embedded in messages to 5 other officers who shared his practices. Jokes about quota systems and profile hunting. Coordination of stops to target specific neighborhoods. Warnings about suspicious vehicles that translated directly to racial profiling. The cartel, monitoring federal channels through their own corrupt sources, recognized the exposure risk the moment Russell's photographs hit his cloud storage. They understood that classified RICO documents in law enforcement hands meant imminent arrests, asset seizures, and conspiracy charges. They made the calculated decision to sever all ties with Russell and minimize their own liability. Anonymous tips began arriving at FBI field offices, encrypted messages detailing Russell's database sales, financial records showing payments to Asset R, communication logs proving Russell's role as an information broker. The cartel was burning its asset to save itself, providing evidence that would accelerate Russell's prosecution, while allowing the organization to eliminate a compromised operative through legal channels rather than the assassination they'd originally planned. Federal investigators executed search warrants across 3 counties, seizing electronics from Russell's home, storage units, and the homes of 5 other officers identified in the email chains. Laptops revealed patterns of discriminatory enforcement ignored by supervisors who had received 38 documented complaints about Russell over 12 years. Body camera footage showed similar stops conducted by officers in Russell's network, creating a pattern of behavior that implicated the entire unit. Blacksmith provided preliminary testimony from her chambers, her account delivered with the precision of someone who had spent a career building prosecutorial cases. She detailed each violation, each ignored warning, each moment Russell had believed his authority was absolute. Her composure transformed personal degradation into prosecutorial ammunition, her legal mind converting humiliation into evidence. The investigation deepened, revealing layers of institutional failure, supervisors who dismissed complaints, internal affairs investigations that cleared Russell despite obvious disparities, a culture that rewarded aggressive policing without scrutinizing its targets. The question emerged implicitly in the patterns, in the statistics, in the footage of Russell dismissing credentials after 3 seconds. Would any of this have unfolded the same way if Judge Blacksmith had been white? If her skin hadn't triggered Russell's assumptions about legitimacy, about criminality, about who belonged in an expensive vehicle? The answer lived in the numbers: 88% of stops targeting minorities, 3-second credential reviews, fabricated stolen vehicle reports deployed exclusively against black drivers. Blacksmith's background added context to her resilience. First-generation college graduate, daughter of a factory worker, and a classroom aide. She had navigated every barrier systemic inequality could construct, from undergraduate admissions to law school scholarships to federal clerkships, where she was often the only black woman in the room. The same strength that had carried her through those gauntlets now fueled her determination to transform this violation into accountability. Evidence mounted toward inevitability. The federal grand jury convened on a Tuesday morning in November, reviewing synchronized video footage, cloud metadata showing Russell's photographs uploading in real time, statistical analysis proving racial bias, financial records documenting corruption, and cartel communications marking him for elimination. The indictment returned on 12 counts: deprivation of rights under color of law, unauthorized access to classified information, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, wire fraud related to database sales, conspiracy to violate civil rights, computer fraud, honest services fraud, witness intimidation for past stops, false imprisonment, assault under color of law, national security violations. Each count carried years. Together, they carried decades. Russell's arrest occurred at his home on a Wednesday morning, federal agents arriving with the same authority he had wielded so carelessly. His house was searched. His pension was frozen pending conviction. His law enforcement certification was suspended immediately. The trial date was set. The evidence was cataloged. The witnesses were prepared. Blacksmith's ordeal was about to become Russell's reckoning. The federal courtroom in downtown Houston filled early on the first day of trial, spectators and media crowding benches normally occupied by attorneys and legal staff. Judge Elias Grant presided from the bench, a jurist from the Western District brought in to ensure impartiality, his gray hair and measured demeanor projecting the gravitas the case demanded. Prosecutors opened with synchronized video, 4 screens displayed simultaneously dashcam, store security cameras 1 through 3, and the pedestrian's phone footage. The jury watched Russell's patrol lights activate behind Blacksmith's Audi, watched her pull into the grocery store lot with full compliance, watched Russell approach, hand near holster, demanding documents without explanation, watched Blacksmith present both driver's license and federal judicial credentials, watched Russell glance at the judicial ID for 3 seconds before declaring it potentially fake. The footage continued, Russell ordering Blacksmith from the vehicle, Thompson arriving as backup, the search beginning despite Blacksmith's clear warnings about classified materials. Russell forcing open the briefcase, his phone emerging, photographing page after page. 58 photos, each one time-stamped, each one uploading to cloud storage, with embedded metadata showing location coordinates precise to within 15 feet of the grocery store parking lot. Prosecutors displayed the metadata on courtroom monitors. Each photograph's digital signature proved when it was taken, where it was taken, and what device captured it. Russell's personal phone linked to his cloud account, creating an irrefutable chain of evidence that couldn't be disputed or deleted. Statistical analysis followed. Dr. Rebecca Lawson, a professor of data science from Rice University, presented her findings with clinical precision. 512 traffic stops over 12 years. 450 targeting minorities. 88% of Russell's stops focused on Black and Hispanic drivers in a county where minorities comprised 32% of the population. The disparity was statistically impossible to explain through random chance. Probability calculations showed odds of 1 in 17 million that such targeting occurred without intentional bias. Financial forensics continued the prosecution's case. Special Agent Thomas Briggs from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit traced $280,000 in cash deposits into Russell's accounts, each deposit following unauthorized database queries that had been sold to cartel affiliates and private investigators seeking information on targets, witnesses, and rivals. Bank records showed the money arriving in increments designed to avoid reporting thresholds, a pattern consistent with structured payments meant to evade detection. Email evidence completed the picture. Messages recovered from Russell's personal account revealed racist language, coordination with 5 other officers to target specific neighborhoods, and discussions of hunting in minority communities. The emails included jokes about quota systems and profile success rates, language that stripped away any pretense of legitimate policing. Victims testified throughout the second week. A young business owner named Jerome Patterson described being pulled over by Russell 3 years earlier, searched without cause, charged with possession of drug paraphernalia that was later proven to be vitamin powder, and spending 6 months fighting fabricated charges that destroyed his credit and cost him a commercial lease. An elderly driver, Dolores Washington, recounted Russell's rough handling during a stop that left her hospitalized with a fractured wrist, the incident dismissed by supervisors as an unfortunate accident despite body camera footage showing excessive force. Their stories established pattern. Their testimony underscored betrayal of public trust. Their presence in the courtroom represented Russell's 12-year legacy of institutional abuse. Blacksmith took the stand on the trial's 9th day. She testified with the same precision she brought to her judicial duties, recounting each moment of the stop, the search, the arrest. She detailed Russell's dismissal of her credentials, his fabrication of a stolen vehicle report, his unauthorized access to classified documents that happened to contain evidence of his own corruption. Defense counsel attempted to portray her as uncooperative, as someone whose resistance to Russell's authority had escalated the encounter. The characterization crumbled under the weight of video evidence showing her compliance, her measured questions about legal basis, her clear warnings about federal felonies. Cross-examination revealed her credentials, her record, her authority to classify proceedings and issue international warrants. The jury saw clearly who had held actual power in that parking lot and who had simply held a badge. The prosecution's closing arguments synthesized everything into a narrative of systematic corruption disguised as policing. Russell had weaponized his authority for 12 years, targeting minorities for stops, selling database access to cartels, fabricating charges, and doing it all while supervisors ignored 38 formal complaints. His arrest of a federal judge had been merely the most visible example of behavior that had victimized hundreds. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty verdicts returned on all 12 counts, the forewoman's voice steady as she read each one into the record. Sentencing occurred 3 weeks later, Judge Grant reviewed presencing reports, victim impact statements, and the scale of Russell's criminal enterprise. He imposed 48 years in federal prison, consecutive sentences on the most serious counts, ensuring Russell would serve decades before any possibility of release. The sentence included forfeiture of pension, revocation of law enforcement certifications, and restitution orders for victims whose lives had been damaged by fabricated charges. Grant's sentencing remarks emphasized the assault on judicial independence, the betrayal of public trust, and the particular violation of targeting a federal judge engaged in national security work. He noted that Russell's actions had undermined confidence in law enforcement, endangered ongoing investigations, and exemplified the racism that continued to poison American policing. Parallel civil proceedings unfolded in state court. Blacksmith filed suit against the county sheriff's department for systemic failures that enabled Russell's behavior. 38 ignored complaints, no investigation despite statistical evidence of bias, supervisors who promoted aggressive policing without accountability. The evidence presented in criminal trial became evidence in civil proceedings. The county's defense collapsed under documentation of institutional indifference. The jury awarded $11.9 million, $4 million in compensatory damages for Blacksmith's false imprisonment, assault, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. $7.9 million in punitive damages designed to punish the county's systemic failures and deter future negligence. Blacksmith held a press conference on the courthouse steps the day after the verdict. She announced that the entire award would be donated to organizations working to end police corruption. $2 million would fund an AI-monitored traffic stop database system being implemented across Texas counties, tracking disparities in real time and flagging potential bias. $1.5 million would support legal defense funds for wrongly accused defendants. The remaining funds would establish an anti-corruption oversight board and support bipartisan legislation in 7 states requiring independent review of racial profiling complaints. The reforms extended beyond monetary awards. The Department of Justice imposed a consent decree on the county sheriff's department requiring federal oversight for 5 years. Mandatory bias training became policy. Independent civilian review boards gained subpoena power. Traffic stop data became public record, published quarterly with demographic breakdowns that allowed community scrutiny. Forensic review of Russell's past cases led to exoneration of 18 individuals who had been wrongfully convicted based on fabricated evidence. Their records were cleared, their reputations restored. Some received settlements, others simply reclaimed their lives from the wreckage Russell had created. Russell sat in federal prison, the authority he'd wielded for 12 years stripped away, replaced by the powerlessness he'd inflicted on others. His appeals were denied systematically, courts finding no error in proceedings that had documented his crimes with uncommon thoroughness. The cartel he'd served abandoned him completely, their anonymous tips having sealed his fate while protecting their own operations. Blacksmith returned to her bench. The handcuff marks faded from her wrists, but the memory of that parking lot stop informing every civil rights case she presided over. Her rulings began setting precedents that strengthened Fourth Amendment protections, narrowed qualified immunity defenses, and expanded accountability for officers who violated constitutional rights. Her ordeal became case law, her name attached to decisions that would shape policing for generations. The story rippled outward through media coverage, through criminal justice reform conferences, through police academies where the case became a cautionary tale about the costs of corruption. It became evidence in legislative hearings across 7 states where bipartisan coalitions drafted laws requiring independent review of racial profiling complaints and real-time monitoring of stop disparities. The reforms prevented future injustices that would never be documented because they never occurred. Traffic stops that didn't happen because officers knew their patterns were being monitored. Database queries that weren't solved because audit systems tracked every access. Complaints that were investigated because civilian boards had actual power. The numbers told the story over time. Minority stops in the county dropped from 88% to 34%, aligning with population demographics. Complaints against officers decreased as accountability increased. Public trust metrics improved gradually, measured through annual surveys that showed communities beginning to believe that reform was possible. Blacksmith's transformation from detained victim to architect of systemic change illustrated the power of endurance, of composure under assault, of wielding truth as method rather than spectacle. Her underdog story, first-generation college graduate, federal prosecutor, appointed judge, Woman who refused to be diminished by handcuffs and humiliation became a narrative of resilience that resonated beyond courtrooms. Russell's fall demonstrated the opposite trajectory: authority without accountability, power without legitimacy, corruption that collapsed under its own weight once exposed to scrutiny. 48 years in federal prison stood as testament to the consequences of betraying public trust. The question that had emerged during investigation lingered in public discourse. Would this have happened if Judge Blacksmith had been white? The answer lived in Russell's patterns, in his 88% targeting rate, in his 3-second credential review, in his assumption that a black woman in an expensive vehicle couldn't possibly be who she claimed. The answer was visible in every statistic, every email, every video frame. The justice delivered was both personal and systemic. Blacksmith reclaimed her dignity, victims received exoneration, a criminal enterprise was dismantled, reforms transformed policing practices. The outcome validated the principle that truth endures, that evidence prevails, that institutions can be forced to live up to their stated ideals when enough pressure is applied with enough precision. The parking lot where it began returned to normal operations. Witnesses forgetting the afternoon a federal judge was detained while buying groceries. But the consequences of that stop continued spreading through legislation, through precedent, through reforms that would prevent hundreds of similar violations. Blacksmith's story became evidence that power underestimated can still prevail, that quiet determination can outlast aggressive authority, that justice, pursued with method and precision, can transform personal ordeal into collective accountability. The appeals were denied, the reforms took hold, the precedents were set. The lesson was documented for anyone willing to learn it. Underestimate someone at your peril, because the person you dismiss might be exactly the person with the power to dismantle everything you've built.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.